My cousin lied that I was spiraling into bad habits to steal my college fund, so I exposed the truth and watched her life fall apart. I used to think family was the safest place in the world, until they chose to believe a liar over me. My name is Madeline Carter and I'm 27 years old now. I work as a legal secretary while studying to become a lawyer at night. But 9 years ago when I was 18, my entire world collapsed because of one person's greed, and my family's willingness to believe her lies over mine. I was the golden child back then. Straight A's, honor roll, accepted to 3 prestigious universities including Harvard and Yale. My parents had saved $80,000 from my college fund since I was born. Every birthday, every Christmas, instead of expensive gifts, that money went into my education account. "This is your future, Maddie," my father would say, showing me the bank statements with pride glowing in his eyes. "We're investing in your dreams." The account had grown steadily over the years, my parents sacrificing vacations and luxuries to ensure I could attend the best schools without drowning in debt. Then there was Vanessa, my cousin, 2 years older than me, drop-dead gorgeous with platinum blonde hair and green eyes that seemed to sparkle with mischief, and completely spoiled by everyone in our extended family. While I buried myself in textbooks and volunteer work, Vanessa was out partying, posting Instagram photos from expensive restaurants and nightclubs, and somehow always having money despite never holding a real job for more than a few weeks. She lived with us for a few months that summer before my senior year because her parents were going through a messy divorce that involved accusations of infidelity and hidden assets. At first, everything seemed normal. Vanessa would compliment my study habits, ask about my college plans, and even seemed genuinely happy for my acceptance letters. She'd sit on my bed while I did homework, painting her nails and gossiping about mutual friends. But I started noticing small things that made me uncomfortable. She'd ask specific questions about the college fund. How much was in there exactly? Which bank held the account? Did I have access to it yet? When I mentioned I'd get control of the account on my 18th birthday in just a few months, something shifted in her eyes, a flash of calculation that disappeared so quickly I wondered if I'd imagined it. The stealing started small, almost imperceptibly. My grandmother mentioned missing $20 from her purse after a family dinner. Then my mom couldn't find her favorite diamond earrings, the ones my father had given her for their anniversary. Little things that could be easily misplaced or forgotten. My family searched everywhere, checking under couch cushions and in jewelry boxes, but nothing turned up. I helped look too, genuinely concerned about these mysterious disappearances, but then Vanessa found my grandmother's earrings hidden in my jewelry box. She brought them to my parents with tears streaming down her face, saying she hated to tell them but she'd seen me take them during the family dinner. Her performance was Oscar-worthy, the reluctant witness, the concerned cousin who didn't want to believe what she'd seen but couldn't stay silent. "Maddie, we need to talk," my father said that evening, his voice colder than I'd ever heard it. My mother sat beside him on the living room couch, looking disappointed and hurt in a way that made my stomach clench with dread. The earrings lay on the coffee table between us like an accusation, catching the lamplight with accusatory glints. "I didn't take those," I said, my voice cracking with confusion and fear. "Dad, you know I wouldn't steal from Grandma, you know me better than that." "Then how did they end up in your room?" my mother asked, her voice thick with tears she was trying not to shed. "Vanessa said she saw you." "Vanessa is lying!" The words burst out of me, desperate and raw. But they exchanged that look that said they'd already made up their minds, already chosen to believe her word over mine. Why would she lie about something like this? Why would I steal from my own grandmother? Over the next few weeks, more items went missing and were mysteriously found in my possession. My aunt's silver bracelet turned up in my backpack. Money from my father's wallet was discovered in my car's glove compartment. Each time, Vanessa was the one who discovered them, always with tears and reluctant explanations about how she'd witnessed my theft but hadn't wanted to say anything because she loved me and hoped I'd stop on my own. My family's trust in me eroded with each incident. They started watching me differently, speaking in hushed tones when I entered rooms, locking up their valuables when I was around. I felt like a stranger in my own home, constantly defending myself against crimes I never committed while the real thief played the role of concerned family member with Academy Award-level performance. The accusations escalated gradually. First it was just family items. Then Vanessa claimed I was stealing from her too. She said money was missing from her purse, that her expensive makeup had disappeared, that I'd taken her credit card and used it online. Each story was plausible, each piece of evidence carefully planted. I began to feel like I was losing my mind, questioning my own memories and wondering if I was somehow blacking out and committing these crimes without remembering. The final blow came 3 weeks before my 18th birthday. I woke up to shouting downstairs, angry voices carrying through the walls of our usually peaceful home. My parents, my grandmother, my aunt and uncle, all gathered in the living room with Vanessa sobbing in the center of it all like a broken angel. "She's been stealing from the college fund," Vanessa wailed, holding up bank statements with shaking hands. "I saw her at the ATM yesterday afternoon when I was walking home from work. She withdrew $500, and when I asked her about it, she got aggressive and told me she was buying drugs. She said if I told anyone she'd hurt me." The room went silent except for Vanessa's theatrical crying. Every pair of eyes turned to me as I stood frozen in the doorway, still in my pajamas, trying to process what I was hearing. The morning light streaming through the windows felt harsh and exposing, making me feel like an intruder in my own home. "That's not true," I whispered, then louder, my voice breaking with desperation. "That's not true. I haven't touched that account. I don't even have the PIN number. Dad, you said I wouldn't get access until my birthday." But Vanessa had an answer for everything. She'd seen me looking through my father's desk where he kept important financial documents. She'd noticed me acting strangely over the past few weeks, staying out late, being secretive about where I was going. She'd even brought up times when I'd seemed high, which were actually just nights when I'd been up until 3 in the morning studying for AP exams and was exhausted. "The money is gone, Maddie," my father said, his voice breaking with what I thought was grief but now realize was disappointment. $500, just like Vanessa said. "We checked the account this morning. I was trapped in a perfect web of lies. Every piece of evidence had been carefully planted, every story meticulously crafted to build a narrative of a good girl gone bad. I could see the doubt in my parents' eyes hardening into certainty, could watch as 18 years of trust and love crumbled under the weight of Vanessa's performance. My grandmother wouldn't even look at me, turning her face away when I tried to meet her eyes. "We can't trust you with this money," my mother said through her tears, her words cutting deeper than any physical blow could have. "Not until you get help. Not until you prove you're clean, and that you understand what you've done." That's when Vanessa delivered her masterstroke. Through her perfectly timed sobs, she volunteered to hold the college fund temporarily to keep it safe from me. She promised to give it back once I'd gone through rehabilitation and proven I was clean. She even offered to pay for the rehab herself, painting herself as the selfless cousin willing to sacrifice for her troubled family member. My family, desperate to protect their investment in my future and believing they were enabling my supposed addiction, agreed immediately. I tried everything to prove my innocence. I begged, I pleaded. I offered to take drug tests right then and there, to see counselors, to do anything to prove I wasn't the person they thought I was. I suggested we check bank cameras, interview witnesses, do anything to verify the truth. But the narrative was already set in stone. I was the problem child who'd fallen into drugs and theft. Vanessa was the caring cousin trying to save me from myself, the hero of this twisted fairy tale. The intervention they staged was humiliating beyond words. Professional counselors, family members taking turns sharing how my addiction had hurt them, reading letters about their disappointment and fear. I sat there listening to fictional accounts of my behavior, hearing my own family describe a person I didn't recognize. When I continued to deny everything, they said it was typical addict behavior, lying, manipulation, refusing to take responsibility. 2 days after I turned 18, they asked me to leave. "Just until you get your life together," my father said, though we both knew it might be forever. The look in his eyes told me he was already grieving for the daughter he thought he'd lost to drugs. I packed my clothes into 2 suitcases, along with my laptop and the few personal items that still felt truly mine. I walked out of the only home I'd ever known with less than $300 to my name and nowhere to go. The first few months were a nightmare I wouldn't wish on anyone. I slept in my car for 2 weeks until I found a tiny studio apartment in the worst part of town, a place where sirens wailed every night and broken glass littered the sidewalks. The rent was $400 a month for a space barely larger than my childhood bedroom, with a leaky ceiling and heating that worked sporadically. I enrolled in community college and worked 3 jobs just to survive. Mornings at a coffee shop where I served lattes to my former classmates who were home from their fancy universities, pretending not to see the recognition and pity in their eyes. Afternoons filing paperwork at a small law firm where the partners treated me like furniture. Evenings cleaning office buildings, emptying trash cans and scrubbing toilets while my former peers were probably at fraternity parties or studying in beautiful libraries. The hardest part wasn't the physical exhaustion or the financial stress. It was the isolation. My family had effectively cut me off, convinced that any contact would enable my supposed addiction. Former friends either believed the rumors about my drug problem or simply drifted away, uncomfortable with my new circumstances. I ate most meals alone, studied alone, lived in a bubble of loneliness that felt suffocating. But I survived. More than that, I slowly began to rebuild. I earned my associate degree with honors despite working 60 hours a week, transferred to a 4-year university with a partial scholarship, and graduated summa cum laude with a degree in political science. Every A on a test, every scholarship earned, every small promotion at work felt like a small victory against the injustice that had derailed my original plans. I was proving to myself, and to anyone who cared to notice, that I was exactly who I'd always been. Meanwhile, Vanessa lived like a queen with my stolen college fund. Her social media became a constant stream of conspicuous consumption that felt like salt in an open wound. Vacations to Bali and Paris, designer clothes from Chanel and Gucci, expensive dinners at restaurants I couldn't afford to even walk past. She tried to become an influencer, spending thousands on professional photography and marketing herself as a lifestyle guru who promoted living your best life. When the influencer dream failed to generate real income, she pivoted to gambling, convinced she could multiply the money at high-end casinos in Vegas and Atlantic City. She documented these trips too, posting photos of herself at poker tables and slot machines, holding champagne glasses and wearing clothes that cost more than I made in a month. She bought a new car every year, first a BMW, then a Mercedes, finally a Tesla that she crashed within 6 months. She moved into a luxury apartment downtown with floor-to-ceiling windows and a view of the city skyline. I watched it all from a distance, each post a knife in my heart. That was my future she was living, my dreams she was buying with stolen money, my opportunities she was squandering on temporary pleasures. But I channeled that pain into determination. Every insult, every dismissive look from family members when I tried to maintain minimal contact, every reminder of what I'd lost, it all became fuel for my relentless pursuit of success. I applied to law school during my senior year of college, driven by a desire to understand justice and maybe someday help other people who'd been wrongly accused. When I got in, I cried for the first time in years, not from sadness but from a complex mixture of pride and grief for the path I'd been forced to take. Then last spring, my aunt called me. Her voice was shaky, almost unrecognizable from the confident woman I remembered. "Maddie, we need to talk. It's about Vanessa. Can you come to the hospital?" The cancer had been growing for months before Vanessa noticed the symptoms. She'd ignored the abdominal pain, attributing it to stress or bad food from her constant dining out. By the time she finally saw a doctor, it had spread throughout her reproductive organs and into her lymph nodes. Stage 4 ovarian cancer. 6 months to live, maybe less if she didn't respond to treatment. "She wants to see you," my aunt continued, her voice breaking. "She says she needs to make things right before it's too late." I met them at the hospital on a rainy Thursday afternoon in May. The oncology ward smelled like disinfectant and fear, filled with the quiet desperation of families facing impossible choices. Vanessa looked nothing like the glamorous woman from her Instagram photos. The disease and chemotherapy had hollowed out her cheeks and dulled her once bright green eyes. Her platinum hair was gone, replaced by a colorful scarf that couldn't hide her fragility. She was 29 years old and dying, looking ancient and childlike at the same time. "Maddie," she whispered when she saw me, her voice paper-thin. "I'm so sorry. For everything." My family sat around her bed like a protective circle. My parents, aged and gray in ways I didn't remember, wearing the exhausted expressions of people who'd been living in hospitals for weeks. My grandmother, now 85 and frail, confused about why we were all there. My aunt and uncle, devastated by their daughter's condition but clinging to hope that somehow love could conquer cancer. The money. Vanessa continued, struggling with each word as if speaking required enormous effort. I spent it all. Every penny. I lied about you stealing, about the drugs, about everything. You never did anything wrong. You were always the good one, and I was jealous. I wanted what you had. The confession I'd waited 9 years to hear, and it felt hollow. Too late to give me back my lost youth, my stolen opportunities, the family relationships that had never fully recovered. Too late to undo the years of poverty and isolation. The nights I'd cried myself to sleep wondering if I'd ever be believed. We know, my father said quietly, reaching across the bed to take my hand for the first time in years. We've known for a while. The way she was spending, the lifestyle she was living on a part-time retail job, we figured it out eventually. We should have believed you, Maddie. We should have protected you instead of throwing you away. But now she's dying, my mother added quickly, her eyes pleading with me to understand. And we're asking if you could find it in your heart to forgive, to keep this between us. She's trying to get her life right with God. And if this comes out now, if people know what she did, they wanted me to stay quiet, to let Vanessa die with her reputation intact, to let my family save face in the community where they'd spent 9 years explaining away their troubled daughter. They were asking me to sacrifice again, just like they'd asked me to sacrifice 9 years ago when they chose her lies over my truth. Please, my grandmother spoke up, her voice trembling with age and emotion. She's just a child. She made mistakes, but she's paying for them now. Don't let her final months be ruined by scandal. Let her die in peace. I looked around the room at their pleading faces. These people who had thrown me away without a second thought were now begging me to protect the person who had destroyed my life. The irony was suffocating. They were asking for mercy they'd never shown me, compassion they'd refused to extend when I needed it most. I need time to think, I said finally, standing up on unsteady legs. I left the hospital and drove home in silence, my mind racing through 9 years of accumulated pain and injustice. For 9 years I'd dreamed of this moment, the moment when the truth would come out and I'd be vindicated. But now that it was here, I felt empty rather than triumphant. Vanessa was dying. My revenge would be against a corpse, and somehow that felt both too little and too much at the same time. But then I thought about 18-year-old Madeline, sitting in that living room surrounded by accusations, with no one to defend her. I thought about all the nights I'd cried myself to sleep in that tiny apartment, wondering if I'd ever see my family again, wondering if I was somehow the terrible person they believed me to be. I thought about every sacrifice I'd made, every opportunity lost, every relationship that had been poisoned by lies I couldn't disprove. They'd had 9 years to make this right, 9 years to investigate, to question Vanessa's suddenly lavish lifestyle funded by mysterious sources, to reach out to their daughter who'd been wrongly exiled. Instead, they'd chosen comfort over truth, reputation over justice, willful blindness over acknowledging their catastrophic mistake. I made my decision. Over the next few weeks, I played the part they wanted me to play with Oscar-worthy performance of my own. I visited Vanessa regularly, holding her skeletal hand while she rambled about her regrets and her newfound faith. I listened to her talk about how the cancer was God's punishment for her sins, how she wanted to make amends before facing judgment. I accepted her tearful apologies with grace and dignity, telling her I forgave her, that I understood she'd been young and foolish. I told my family that I harbored no resentment, that I understood their impossible position, that I would keep their secret and let Vanessa die in peace. They relaxed visibly, believing that their crisis had been averted, that they could maintain their standing in the community while privately dealing with their guilt. But during those same weeks, I was busy with a different kind of work. I gathered every piece of evidence I could find, some of it requiring creativity and persistence that my legal training had taught me. Bank records showing the exact timing of withdrawals from my college fund, and corresponding deposits into Vanessa's various accounts. Screenshots of her social media posts, showing expensive purchases made within days of money disappearing from my account. Credit card statements I obtained through legal channels showing her gambling debts and luxury purchases. I tracked down former friends and acquaintances who remembered her partying and gambling habits, who could testify to her reckless spending and lies about her income sources. I found employees at the banks who remembered the transactions, store clerks who recalled her expensive shopping sprees, casino workers who recognized her as a regular high roller despite her supposed low-income status. Most importantly, I obtained my complete medical records from my family doctor, showing a clear history with no evidence of drug use, no signs of the addiction my family had been so convinced was destroying my life. I gathered character references from employers, professors, and volunteer organizations where I'd given my time over the years. I wrote it all down in a detailed, methodical letter that read like a legal brief, because that's essentially what it was. I laid out the timeline of lies and the systematic way my cousin had destroyed my life, while my family watched and enabled her. I explained how an 18-year-old girl had been thrown away based on fabricated evidence, how a family had chosen to believe a master manipulator over their own daughter, and how justice had been delayed but would not be denied. I researched the local media landscape, identifying 3 newspapers and 2 television stations that would be most likely to run the story. I prepared comprehensive packets for each, including copies of all my evidence, contact information for witnesses who'd agreed to speak, and a clear timeline that any journalist could follow. Vanessa died on a Tuesday morning in late October, surrounded by family members who'd spent her final weeks believing they'd successfully managed the crisis of her deathbed confession. The funeral was scheduled for Friday, with a viewing Thursday night. My family spent those days planning a service that would present her as a beloved daughter and cousin who'd struggled with illness but maintained her faith and dignity to the end. The obituary they wrote was a masterpiece of selective memory, describing her as a bright light who touched everyone she met, and a young woman who faced her final challenge with grace and courage. There was no mention of theft, lies, or the destruction of another person's life. It was exactly the kind of whitewashed legacy they'd begged me to help preserve. On Thursday morning, as people began arriving at the funeral home to pay their respects, my letter was published simultaneously in 3 local newspapers. I'd coordinated the timing carefully, sending the packets with instructions that they be opened and published exactly 24 hours before the funeral service. The headline in the largest paper read, "The Truth About Vanessa Carter, A Family's 9-Year Cover-Up Exposed." The smaller papers ran variations, "Local Family Sacrificed Daughter to Protect Thief and Deathbed Confession Reveals Decade of Lies." By noon, the story had been picked up by regional news outlets hungry for a dramatic local interest story. By evening, it was trending on social media under hashtags like #JusticeForMadeline and #FamilyBetrayal. The funeral home was surrounded by reporters asking questions about the family that had disowned their own daughter to protect a thief. My phone rang constantly throughout the day, my family, furious and desperate, demanding to know how I could do such a thing, how I could destroy a dying woman's reputation, how I could bring this scandal down on them when they were grieving. Former friends from high school, apologizing for believing the rumors about my supposed drug problem, and asking if there was anything they could do to help. Reporters wanting interviews, lawyers offering to help me sue for the stolen money, advocacy groups asking me to speak about family abuse and false accusations. I turned off my phone and sat in my apartment, finally at peace for the first time in 9 years. The funeral the next day was a disaster that exceeded even my expectations. Half the expected attendees didn't show up, embarrassed to be associated with the scandal or uncertain how to face my family knowing what they now knew. Those who did come whispered among themselves, pointing at my family members and shaking their heads in disapproval. The pastor's eulogy was awkward and brief, clearly struggling with how to memorialize someone whose life had been publicly exposed as a lie. He spoke in generalities about God's mercy and the complexity of human nature, unable to offer the usual platitudes about a life well lived. My family tried to paint me as a vindictive person who couldn't let go of the past, who'd chosen to hurt a dying woman out of spite. But the evidence was too overwhelming, the pattern of lies too clear, the timeline too detailed to dismiss. The community that had once judged me for my supposed crimes now judged them for their willingness to sacrifice their own daughter to protect a fraud. In the weeks that followed, the story took on a life of its own. Legal experts weighed in on television programs about family law and victim rights. Social media was filled with debates about forgiveness versus justice, about when families should protect their members and when they should demand accountability. Several law firms reached out to me, not just offering to help recover the stolen money, but offering me positions. One of the senior partners at the most prestigious downtown firm had followed my story closely and was impressed by both my resilience and my methodical approach to seeking justice. "We need people with your integrity and determination," a partner told me during my interview in his corner office overlooking the city. "What you went through, what you overcame, the way you handled this situation, that's exactly the kind of character we want representing our clients. You understand both sides of justice, what it means to be wrongly accused and what it takes to prove the truth." They offered me a position as a paralegal with full tuition support to finish my law degree and a guaranteed job as an associate once I passed the bar. The salary was more than I'd made in my previous 3 jobs combined, with benefits that included health insurance and a retirement plan, luxuries I'd never been able to afford. For the first time in 9 years, my future looked genuinely bright. Not the future I'd originally planned, but something even better because I'd earned it entirely through my own efforts, because I'd proven my worth in the face of impossible odds. My family made several attempts to reconcile after the immediate storm died down. They claimed they'd been in an impossible situation, caught between protecting one family member and supporting another. They said they'd always loved me, had always hoped I'd come home, that they'd made their choices out of fear and confusion rather than malice. But love isn't just a feeling. It's a choice made again and again, especially when that choice is difficult. And they'd chosen Vanessa over me at every crucial moment for 9 straight years. They'd chosen her lies over my truth, her comfort over my justice, her reputation over my vindication. Even at the very end, facing the undeniable reality of what she'd done, they'd asked me to sacrifice again, rather than demanding she face the consequences of her actions. I didn't cut them off completely, because I'm not a cruel person despite what they might think. But I built boundaries they would never be allowed to cross again. Holiday cards sent to a P.O. box but no visits to my home. Polite conversation if we encountered each other in public, but no intimate family gatherings or Sunday dinners. They were strangers who happened to share my DNA, and I treated them with the distant courtesy I'd show to any stranger. The real surprise came 8 months later when I met James at a legal conference. He was a prosecutor with the district attorney's office, passionate about justice and completely fascinated by my story of survival and success. Our first conversation lasted 4 hours, ranging from law and ethics to literature and travel, from the importance of truth in a world full of convenient lies to our shared love of old movies and good wine. "You're exactly the kind of person the legal profession needs," he told me over coffee after the conference ended. "Someone who understands that justice isn't just about winning cases or making money. It's about making sure the truth gets told and the right people are protected." We've been together 10 months now, and for the first time in my adult life, I'm with someone who sees my strength instead of my scars. Someone who admires what I've built rather than pitying what I've lost. He knows my whole story and loves me not despite it but because of how it shaped me into the person I am today. I graduated from law school last spring summa cum laude, and I passed the bar exam on my first attempt. The firm where I work offered me a position in their family law division, helping other people navigate the complicated dynamics of broken relationships, disputed inheritances, and custody battles, where truth becomes a casualty of emotion and manipulation. My first case involved a teenager whose stepmother had accused her of stealing family heirlooms to sell for drug money. The evidence was thin, the family dynamics were toxic, and everyone involved seemed more interested in winning than in finding the truth. I threw myself into that case with the passion of someone who understood exactly what was at stake, and we proved the girl's innocence while exposing the stepmother's own theft and drug problem. "How did you know?" the girl asked me after the case was resolved, and she was safely back with her biological mother. "How did you know I was telling the truth when everyone else thought I was lying?" "Because I've been where you are," I told her. "And I know what it looks like when someone is being set up. Sometimes people ask me if I regret exposing Vanessa after she died, if I think I went too far in my pursuit of justice, if I should have shown mercy to a dying woman. The answer is always the same. I regret nothing. For 9 years I carried the weight of other people's lies, let their version of events define who I was and limit what I could become. The truth wasn't just about clearing my name, it was about reclaiming my story, about refusing to let injustice go unanswered simply because it was convenient for other people. Vanessa made her choices, and those choices had consequences that extended far beyond her own life. My family made their choices too, and they're living with the results. I simply refuse to be the only one who paid the price for decisions I didn't make, for crimes I didn't commit, for lies I didn't tell. I learned that forgiveness doesn't require silence, and healing doesn't mean accepting injustice. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do, for yourself and for society, is to refuse to enable someone's harmful behavior, even if that someone is family, even if that someone is dying. The girl who was thrown away at 18 became a woman who couldn't be discarded. The daughter who was sacrificed for someone else's sins became a lawyer dedicated to making sure other people's truths get heard, other victims get justice. Other families think twice before choosing the easy lie over the difficult truth. I used to think I needed my family's approval to be whole, that I couldn't be complete without their love and acceptance. Now I know that integrity comes from within, that self-respect cannot be given or taken away by others, and that the only approval that truly matters is the one I give myself when I look in the mirror each morning. The truth always wins in the end. It might take 9 years, it might require more strength than you think you have, and it might cost you relationships you thought you couldn't live without. But it wins, because lies require constant maintenance while truth stands on its own foundation. And I'm living proof that sometimes losing everything is the only way to discover what you're truly capable of building.